Greetings, I'm Hurt Castro, coming to you from our state-of-the-art suspension development center in Colorado Springs. Today we're going to continue the Rockshox VIVID rear shock service. This is the most complex of any SRAM family service. You're watching the Part 2 video where we're covering steps 5 through 7. Refer to Part 1 for steps 1 through 4 if you haven't already.
The fifth step is to service the low-speed compression valve. Sixth, service the ending stroke rebound. Seventh, and finally, bleed and reassemble the VIVID rear shock. Unless you've done this many times before, we sure do recommend that you check out these Rockshox product manuals, which are on the SRAM website as PDFs.
Please print these out and read through them before you put your bike in the stand. Okay, enough preliminaries, let's get down to business.
Using a 2mm hex, remove the low-speed compression knob. You don't need to completely remove the retaining screw to remove the knob. Squeeze the low-speed compression valve assembly between your fingers and carefully push it up and out of the body side IFP reservoir. Continue to squeeze the compression valve assembly together, which houses the detent ball and spring as you remove it. Be careful not to lose these parts. Separate the inner knob and detent ball and spring from the low-speed compression valve assembly. Slide the shim check spring off the valve assembly. Using your fingers, unthread the compression needle from the back of the low-speed compression valve assembly. Inspect the check shim for damage and replace it if necessary. If the check shim needs to be replaced, use your fingernail instead of a pick to avoid damaging the valve sealing surface. Remove the low-speed compression valve main O-ring, compression piston O-ring, and compression needle O-ring. Apply grease to the new main, compression, and needle O-rings and reinstall them. Remove the shock from the vise and pour out any remaining oil. Clamp the shock by the body eyelet back into the vise. Using your fingers, thread the compression needle back into the low-speed compression valve assembly. Slide the shim check spring onto the assembly. Using a dab of grease to hold the parts together, insert the detent spring into the inner knob, followed by the detent ball. Install the inner adjuster onto the compression needle and hold the entire assembly together by squeezing it between your fingers. Carefully insert the low-speed compression valve assembly into the shock body, inner knob first. Use your little finger to help guide the assembly into place. Make sure the low-speed compression valve assembly is fully seated. Be careful not to damage the main O-ring. Hand thread the IFP reservoir onto the shock body until it's tight. Make sure there's no gap between the IFP reservoir and the shock body. Using a 2mm hex, reinstall the low-speed compression knob. Clamp the shock into the vise sideways by the body eyelet so the ending stroke rebound adjuster is easily accessible. Using a 2.5mm hex, turn the ending stroke rebound adjuster 5 clicks from fully open. Using a pick, remove the ending stroke rebound retaining ring. Using a 2.5mm hex, unthread the ending stroke rebound adjuster screw and remove it. The ending stroke rebound adjuster houses 2 detent balls, the detent spring, a high-speed rebound coil spring and plug, and 2 shims. Be careful not to lose these parts. Remove the ending stroke rebound adjuster screw O-ring. Apply grease to a new O-ring and reinstall. Using a dab of grease to hold the parts together, stack the 6mm narrow shim onto the rebound plug, followed by the wider 7mm shim. Carefully drop the rebound plug, shims first, into the rebound hole. Insert the high-speed rebound coil spring on top of the rebound plug. Gently seat the rebound plug into place with a pick. Grease the ending stroke rebound adjuster screw. Insert the detent spring into its hole, followed by the detent balls into the holes on either side. Use a dab of grease to keep the detent balls in place. Carefully insert the ending stroke rebound adjuster screw into the ending stroke rebound housing. Using a 2.5mm hex, thread until it stops. All parts are properly seated when you hear clicking sounds. You don't want to feel the parts binding as you thread the adjuster screw into place. It should remain smooth until it starts to click. If the parts bind, it means one of the detent balls came unseated and you'll need to redo this step. Using your fingers, reinstall the ending stroke rebound retaining ring. Using a 2.5mm hex, turn the ending stroke rebound adjuster fully counterclockwise toward the rabbet to ensure the retaining ring is fully seated. Clamp the shock by its body eyelet so the shock body and IFP reservoir are accessible. Place the centering ring crush washer in the inner ring groove. If your shock has an O-ring face seal in the centering ring, replace it with a crush washer. Using the inner tube as a push rod, press the centering ring crush washer side down into the bottom of the shock body. 5.1 only. Turn the low-speed compression knob fully counterclockwise away from the plus sign. Using SRAM pit stop 2.5 weight, fill the IFP reservoir to the top. Oil will gradually flow from the IFP reservoir into the shock body through the small port located at the bottom. Continue to fill the IFP reservoir until the oil level in the shock body reaches approximately 25 millimeters in depth. Begin the reverse process of pouring oil into the shock body. Continue until oil starts to overflow out of the IFP reservoir. This procedure effectively dislodges air bubbles from the system. Top off the oil in the shock body to keep oil flowing from the shock body to the IFP reservoir. Gently slide the IFP step side down on top of the IFP reservoir. Let the IFP float on the oil in the IFP reservoir. Cover the bleed hole on the IFP with your thumb to create a seal. Firmly push the IFP down approximately 12 millimeters into the IFP reservoir. You will feel the IFP O-ring engage the wall of the IFP reservoir once it is past the threads. Top off the oil in the shock body again to keep oil flowing from the shock body to the IFP reservoir. Wait for the oil to overflow from the IFP reservoir before continuing. Using the T10 Torx, install the IFP bleed screw and tighten until the IFP spins. Using the T10 Torx as a push rod, firmly push the IFP down into the IFP reservoir until it stops, 45.5 millimeters from the top of the IFP reservoir. Insert the shock body inner tube into the shock body with the cross holes up toward the opening. It's critical that the cross holes are facing up toward the shock body opening. Gently wiggle the inner tube side to side with your finger against the shock body to dislodge any air bubbles between the two walls. Now top off the oil in the shock body one last time. Seat the seal head fully against the piston of the shaft assembly. Place the piston in oil on top of the shock body at a 45-degree angle. Rotate the shaft assembly 2 or 3 times to cover the piston assembly in oil. Continue to rotate the shaft assembly as you align it vertically and gently insert the assembly into the shock body. This process minimizes trapped air during the assembly process. Hold the shaft assembly by the seal head and slowly thread the seal head onto the shock with your fingers. Trapped air and oil should escape through the notch in the seal head threads. Do not push on the shaft assembly from the shaft eyelet. This could displace more oil than is necessary at this time. Be sure to perform this step slowly, allowing oil and air to escape through the notch. Continue to thread the seal head down until the seal head O-ring is engaged. Using the 24mm pin spanner tool, torque the seal head to 250 inch-pounds. Firmly hold the 24mm pin spanner in place with one hand while torquing with the other. The torque wrench should be attached to the 24mm pin spanner tool at a 90-degree angle in order to obtain an accurate torque measurement. Remove the shock from the vise and pour out any excess oil that is remaining above the IFP. Failure to remove this excess oil will reduce the IFP volume and limit shock travel. Next, wipe out the IFP with a clean, dry rag. Clamp the shock back into the vise at the body eyelet and install the IFP reservoir seal head. Using the 24mm pin spanner tool, torque to 100 inch-pounds. The torque wrench should again be attached at a 90-degree angle. Install the Vivid air adapter onto a gauged pump. Make sure the adapter O-ring is in good condition. Before pumping, make sure the Schrader valve core is installed. Now charge the IFP chamber to 200 psi for the Vivid 5.1 and 230 psi for the Vivid 4.1. Using a T10 Torx, install the IFP air cap onto the reservoir seal head.
Spray the entire shock with alcohol and wipe clean with a lint-free rag. And with that, you're done. Time to replace the coil and any mounting hardware you may have removed, then reinstall the shock on the bike.